Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining the webinar. We'll get started at the top of the hour. Hello and welcome. Thanks for joining the webinar on engaging students with disabilities and safe routes to school. A little bit about us. We are the Safe Routes to School National Partnership. We're a nonprofit organization that works to advance safe walking and bicycling to and from school, to improve the health and well-being of kids of all races, income levels and abilities, and to foster the creation of healthy communities for everyone. A little bit about what we do. We improve quality of life for kids, families, and communities. We advance policy change at the federal, state, regional, and local levels. We catalyze support for safe, healthy, active communities, and we share our deep expertise. Before we begin, let's go over some webinar housekeeping. To the left is the GoToWebinar viewer through which you'll see the presentation. To the right is the GoToWebinar control panel where you can raise your hand, ask questions, and select the audio mode you'll use. Please note, your control panel will collapse automatically when not in use. To keep it open, you can click the View menu and uncheck Auto Hide Control Panel. Two options for listening to us today. You can use your telephone or your computer microphone and speakers. If you have sound problems with one selection, go ahead and try the other option. We'll do our best to field any issues. Just send us a message. Even though you're muted, we want to hear your input. Use the questions box to ask speakers questions for the Q&A portion of the webinar, and we will answer them at the end of the webinar. After viewing today's presentation, you might want to view it again or send the link to some of your friends. If that's the case, you can do it for free by visiting our website. Go to saferoutespartnership.org, click on the Resource tab heading, and click on Webinars in the list on the left-hand side of the page. All past webinars are stored here for your viewing pleasure, and they're a great resource, so I encourage you to visit this page. Okay, well now I'd like to introduce our speakers. We have an excellent group here today. So first up is Chris Mackey. In 2016, Chris joined the National Center on Health, Physical Activity, and Disability as an information specialist focusing on the public health sector. His work addresses the inclusion of people with disabilities in healthy community initiatives and other areas such as worksite wellness and health equity for people with disabilities. Chris graduated from East Carolina University with a degree in therapeutic recreation and has briefly held an International Sports Science Association Certified Fitness Trainer certification. He has served on various advisory boards and has extensive knowledge of accessibility and compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act.
Okay, thank you so much, Hannah, and thank you everyone for having me today. Again, as she said, my name is Chris Mackey. I'm an information and inclusion specialist focusing on the public health sector for the at the National Center on Health, Physical Activity, and Disability. And I'm going to talk a little bit about who we are and what we do, and then get into some broad basic concepts around inclusion for safe routes to school and kids with disabilities. So who is NCPAD? NCPAD, again, we're the National Center on Health, Physical Activity, and Disability. We're a national practice and resource center funded by the National Center on Birth Defects and Developmental Disabilities at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. We're primarily known as an online resource. We definitely invite you to visit www.nchpad.org and chpad.org, and to view a variety of all the resources that we have available that benefit all ages and all populations and all ability levels. Basically, what we do here at Nick Penn is we work to support the accessibility and the inclusion of people with disabilities in existing and future public health promotion programs, and we gear that towards improving physical activity, or that are geared towards improving physical activity, nutrition, and healthy food access, and healthy weight management. NICPAD is actually physically based within the Lakeshore Foundation, which is a Paralympic and Olympic training center in Birmingham, Alabama. And it not only does it function as a Paralympic and Olympic training center, but it also works to increase opportunities for athletics and recreation for people with physical disabilities through programs directed at research, programs that are basically recreation and sports opportunities for people with disabilities, and then through work that is focused on policy and advocacy. And really, the goal of NICPAD's work and the broad topic of today's presentations is inclusion. And what we aim for when we practice inclusion is providing kids with disabilities, and kids in this case, but certainly people of all ages, the same opportunity to benefit from and contribute to Safe Routes programs as those kids who do not have disabilities. And the important part here too is to also see the idea of inclusion as a right. Students have the right to participate fully in Safe Routes to School programs and gain the same benefits, or as many of the same benefits as they can, as their peers who don't have disabilities. So as we see depicted here with the inaccessible curb cut next to the accessible curb cut, this is what we're aiming for with Safe Routes to School. We're transforming community environments that are usable by everyone, and not just a few folks. So looking at issues for people of all abilities and transforming communities, including school communities, so that the programs that are hosted in those communities are accessible for everyone. In this case, Safe Routes to School. So if we think about inclusion in terms of the 6 E's of Safe Routes to School, we look at things like in the education piece, we look at education for all students. So any educational opportunities within Safe Routes to School are available to everyone, regardless of ability level. But also education could be offered to parents of kids with disabilities who need to or would like to learn more about how their child can be more active in the program and benefit from it. But also education involves the education of staff and volunteers, and making sure that they have sort of a grounding, a foundational knowledge in what inclusion is. So education is a very important piece, but you have to be sure that you're reaching not only just students, but staff and families as well. In terms of encouragement, we look at encouragement through inclusive strategies like group competitions instead of individual competitions. And when you're involving organizations from the community to promote and participate in Safe Routes to School, consider inviting and involving disability organizations. In the engineering part of the 6 E's, we look at any pedestrian built environment, of course. That's often what people first think of when they think of inclusion and accessibility. And so in pedestrian environments and sidewalks and the like, you're looking for sidewalks that are usable by everyone and that are accessible to everyone. Like we showed in the previous slide, you have features like accessible curb ramps and crosswalks and the like. But engineering also involves having accessible equipment for particularly for when you're looking at bike to school programs. So having things like hand cycles or tandem bikes or recumbent bikes available for students who may not be able to use a typical bike. When you look at evaluation processes should include questions about accessibility, and students with disabilities and their families should be able to offer feedback on how the Safe Routes to School program benefited them and how it went for them. When it comes to addressing equity, this is the newer E in the 6Es framework. Programs, when you have a Safe Routes to School program, you want to make sure that it is available to all students with disabilities. So sometimes you may find that your program serves people or students with physical disabilities and sensory disabilities really well, but maybe their educational opportunities were not available to students with intellectual disabilities. And so you want to go back and reevaluate your program and seek out other resources that can make it more available to all students. And of course, it's important to work with law enforcement to ensure that regulations that could affect participation of students with disabilities are enforced. An example would be to make sure that walking routes are not blocked by vehicles, or curb cuts are not blocked by vehicles, which is often a barrier to students with disabilities participating in programs like Safe Routes to School. Really, the only way for inclusive Safe Routes to School programs to work is through partnership. You have to partner with different organizations for your program to be successful and inclusive. As I mentioned previously, it is important for all staff to have basic knowledge of inclusion of kids with disabilities, but you don't have to be an expert. There are sort of natural supports at the school and community levels, such as special education teachers, maybe allied health therapists, occupational physical therapists, special recreation personnel in the community, disability organizations like Centers for Independent Living within the community, and even parents and students with disabilities themselves, of course. They may not know Safe Routes to School, but all of these organizations and people that I mentioned do understand inclusion and do understand what it means to be more accessible. And so you have to partner with them and remember that as a Safe Routes to School program operator, you don't have to be the expert in inclusion. There are natural supports. Then, of course, it is important to make use of natural resources like us at Nick Penn or national disability organizations or organizations that focus on a specific issue related to community inclusion, such as independent living, the National Council on Independent Living, or the National Aging and Disability Transportation Center, which focuses obviously on transportation issues for people with disabilities. As I mentioned, NICPAD is a resource center. We have a vast number of resources related to physical activity, healthy communities, healthy eating, and persons with disabilities. One of the ones that obviously applies most directly to this program or the program of Safe Routes to School is the Discover Inclusive Safe Routes to School Guidebook. In 2011, Dr. Tanya Whitehead authored this manual, and while it's not the only resource on the topic, it does dive deep into the nuts and bolts of inclusive safe routes, including how to think about how to create an appropriate walking route, both inside or outside the school, adapted bikes, training staff and volunteers, safety issues, and outreach to parents and families of kids with disabilities. Those are all addressed in the manual, and it is available on our website, and we can share that through the Safe Routes Partnership folks. We can share the link to that, and we do have a limited number of hard copies as well. The guide also contains studies and sort of real-life case studies or stories about how certain school systems have successfully integrated kids with disabilities into Safe Routes to School programs. And We also have a number of other relevant resources that may be of interest to you. We do encourage you to look those up on our website. We have resources related to youth with disabilities and physical activity. As you can see, the document on the left-hand side of the screen, that's sort of a list of different resources related to youth and physical activity. We have a addendum that we've created for the Comprehensive School Physical Activity Plan or program, where we talk about how to include kids with disabilities in that particular program. Again, we have our Discover Safe Routes to School manual. We have what we call our How I Walk campaign, where we have a number of pictures and advertising pieces that are useful for promoting walking. And essentially what How I Walk was or is a response to the Surgeon General's call to get more people walking. And what it does is focus on the term walking as an inclusive term. So whether you are in a wheelchair or you use a walker or you don't have a disability at all of you are walkers, and that's what How I Walk focuses on, and again provides resources for promoting walking and walking programs as in an inclusive way. And again, these are all available on nickpad.org. We also have a section that focuses exclusively on educators and has information on inclusive and adapted PE, and just promoting physical activity and physical education in the school setting. Another resource developed by NICPAD is actually another website called www.committoinclusion.org. This is an online campaign that basically is grounded in 9 guidelines for including people with disabilities in health promotion programs and policies. And perhaps more importantly, is it offers a health promotion organizations like Safe Routes to School programs the opportunity to pledge online and publicly say how they will work to include people with disabilities into their programs. And we definitely invite Safe Routes to School programs from anywhere in the country to go to committoinclusion.org and share how you are successfully including kids with disabilities and their families into the work that you're doing. So that was a very, very quick overview of what we have to offer at NICPAD and some of the ideas to think about when you're looking at promoting inclusion in Safe Routes to School. Again, definitely check out our website. We have an online live chat on the website and obviously a 800 number that you can call and an email that you can also contact us through. And we'll be happy to provide any information and resources that we can, and we definitely look forward to working with the national partnership in the very near future. So that is my presentation for today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris, for providing us with so many resources. We worked with Chris to look at inclusion in Safe Routes to School, and with assistance from Chris and others at NACPAD, we asked Safe Routes to School practitioners about inclusion in our annual field survey. So here are a few results right here for those of you that are on the phone. First question is, has your organization, school, or program conducted any training related to including students with disabilities in Safe Routes to School? And you can see here, just under 20% said yes, under 70% said no, and then there was just a little bit over 10% that said, I don't know. Second question, has your organization, school, or program adapted program materials or activities for students or families with a disability? And we had about 18% that said yes, just over 60% that said no, and then close to 20% that said, I don't know. And then the last question, would you like more information about any of the following topics regarding how to include students and families with a disability in Safe Routes to School? And you can see that there is a lot of interest in learning more about how to include students with disabilities in walk and bike education, walk and bike encouragement programs, policy development, strong need for more information on adaptive bicycles and training resources. So with that, I'd like to introduce John, who's going to be our next speaker. John Waterman is the founder and executive director of Programs to Educate All Cyclists, which is a nonprofit that empowers individuals with disabilities through active modes of transportation. John is a special education teacher who is certified to teach students with cognitive and emotional impairments. For the last 30 years, he has been running cycling programs for individuals with disabilities. John is a representative for individuals with disabilities on many state and regional committees, but he is most proud of his current students with disabilities who are beginning to serve on those committees. In recognition of his efforts, John was awarded the National Boggs Mitchell Award for the inclusion of individuals with disability. Take it away, John.
All right. Thank you very much. As director of PEAK, PEAK is an organization that empowers individuals with disabilities through active modes of transportation, biking, buses, and walking. Why include individuals with disabilities into Safe Routes to School? Why meet that challenge? Why head forward? Why make all this extra effort? First is, it is the law. And the law said the purpose of Safe Routes to School is to enable and encourage children with disabilities, encourage children, including those with disabilities, to walk and bike to school. The inclusion of that word, including those with disabilities, that is already part of ADA. So the legislators, when they pushed that forward, they wanted to make sure the students with disabilities who may be the most vulnerable and who may benefit the most from Safe Routes to School did not get looked over. And when trying to meet the challenges for Safe Routes to School. Universal designs is what we're talking about and really what a push is for our community. And universal design comes in many forms. The sidewalks, the curb cuts, and things to make it easier to travel. When we make our communities accessible to everybody, we actually make it easier for most people to travel. Wheelchair ramps makes it easier for a mom in a stroller. The truncated domes actually allow people to recognize where to wait when they're crossing the street and makes the experience of traveling independent easier for all. But it's not just the infrastructure. It's also the education. Things like using words to share information for individuals with disabilities, teleprompters, different type of videos. When we show the videos, make sure we have closed captioning on for all students. Yes, it'll help the individuals with hearing impairment the most, but individuals who have processing delays and other challenges can really benefit from having closed captioning on all the videos and everything we show in the school. So using those universal designs in a classroom can make it more accessible for our education, our encouragement, and each piece we do. The main reason to do this is it does change the lives of individuals with disabilities. The ability to travel independently is the #1 barrier to accessing our community, to getting a job, to living independently, to being a full part of our community and making a difference. Physical? This young man here is James. And James actually faced many surgeries in his life. And this was, I believe, his second or third time where he had to learn to walk again, had severe hip dysplasia, and the bike became his major part of his physical therapy to make him stronger and better and to get part of our community. The obesity rate is 30% higher for individuals with disabilities. This is primarily caused by high caloric food and the lack of physical exercise. Many times, students with disabilities do not participate in the high school sporting teams or after-school sports. Sometimes the degree of intensity of the sporting events they compete with is not as high as their counterparts without a disability. Social interaction, recreation becomes one of the most segregated parts of our life. There is no laws that say you must recreate with others individuals and transfer from place to place, and many times individuals with disabilities are left off to the side, standing and watching. This family here is the Sword family, and both Bruce and Cherie were club presidents at one time, and their daughter, Rebecca, faces severe disabilities. Rebecca is completely blind, and she is unable to walk due to some physical challenges. So the Blinky Bike and learning how to ride together through their summer program allowed the Sword family to ride together. And their ride to school was one of the greatest moments of now their family can share something they thought they lost because of the challenges Rebecca had. The experience of recreating together bonds and develops an acceptance that many times students rarely experience. All right. Special education data. As we start talking about it, and it was kind of mentioned about, if many times we think of a person with disabilities, we think of an individual in a wheelchair or a visual impairment, or someone we know with autism. Disabilities are all over the spectrum. However, looking at the numbers and the data really starts opening our eyes. When we think about the universal design and the ADA of sidewalks, we're really thinking about individuals who use mobility devices who may be visually impaired. That's less than 4% of the students who receive special education services. The majority of special education services come from individuals with learning disabilities, speech and language, cognitive impairments, and autism. When you start looking at those areas are all an educational base or a encouragement base, and that involvement in getting engaged really the importance of a universal design or support in education becomes very helpful. Another fear people have is the cost of education, and the cost of special education is a great mystery. There's very few data that have to be reported regarding the cost of special education, and the best estimates I've been able to locate is in Michigan, 13% of the students receive special education services. And a local school district, the CFO, indicated that about 20% of all educational costs is special education services. So as we start looking at, the cost of Safe Routes to School and the cost of Safe Routes to School programs, we may want to look at the school districts of what they're spending to provide special education support to the students. And then a 20% mark would be a 1 to 5, a 20% ratio for support of special education projects, pilot programs, and stuff like that. Not all students are going to be independent travelers. And as we've gone through our program helping individuals become independent, we really looked at 4 levels of independence that we could share with our parents. And these levels go across disabilities, meaning if it's a physical disability, an intellectual disability, an emotional disability, depending on how great it is, may limit the amount of independence you have. Now, independence, we're talking about individuals able to do things without support or what type of support they would need. Somebody may require a lot of dependence and support in their life to take care of their personal needs because of a great physical challenge, but intellectually they can make all the decisions for themselves, and they have a very independent way about them and traveling and making their decisions. So the domain of physical, emotional, and intellectual really can vary what that full independence, functional independence, support independence, and participation looks like. Quick definitions: full independence are individuals need little support. Usually attend schools, they have a teacher who is a consultant helping the general ed teachers mainstream them through the programs. They're able to do a lot of independence. Most likely, it takes very minor supports to Safe Routes to School program to reach out to these students. And this really becomes a large chunk of students with disabilities, individuals with mild cerebral palsy, individuals with slight learning disabilities. Functional independence becomes our next level. And this is a domain where individuals can become independent if the environment is accessible, and can be independent if the route, they know the route, they know how to travel. They can acquire this ability of independence in this finite area. However, when there's a change in the environment, or they physically have a change, then they may require some support to help them temporarily overcome whatever change it is, learn the skills they need to learn, or make the adaptations for the community to be independent again. Supported independent are individuals that require some supervision, individuals that due to decision making, due to their mobility device, due to their physical needs or emotional needs, ability to make a decision based on the environment, needs a person to be by them, to be helping them, to guide with them. Sometimes this can be done in a group, sometimes this can be done from a distance. And then the final level is participation, where the individual does require a one-on-one person to be by them, to help them through that situation, to help them become independent and to travel. Looking at those levels of independence, they vary by environment. And we actually came up with 3 different models of schools. I'm not going to go through every model, but the neighborhood school is the child with disability attending the school in their neighborhood. And that's where they attend, and that's the easiest place to put a Safe Routes to School, where they are provided special supports they need in their home school, which is where they live. The other environments become more challenging, and that would be a program such as a satellite, where the students then go to a different school to receive the services that is not their home schools, that would be further away to travel, that they may have to have a remote drop-off to participate in Safe Routes to School. And finally, one of the more challenging environments is the center-based program that only educates individuals with disabilities. This may be encouraged because many center-based programs have job training and skill development and can have some specialized staff and training to work with that, but students are coming from usually all over in a county area or a much larger geographic area, so the Safe Routes to School program becomes even more challenging for those types of programs. Riding together. The school in Woodland Meadows and Heritage of Saline, Michigan actually provided a complete universal design Safe Routes to School bike day. And this is a quick little area of the pathway they're riding to get to the roads to go to their school. All students were able to ride together. The organization Peak provided tandem training, so parents could learn to tandem the bikes for their child with a disability. We provided staff for the parents that needed extra help and couldn't acquire that skill. And then the bikes and equipment that were needed and adapted were provided. And every student in Woodland Meadows and Heritage Schools in Saline 10 years ago participated in a bike to school or walk to school day. There was only remote drop-offs from the bus, and the bike train had well over 100 individuals with it. So that model was completely inclusive for a couple of reasons. One is there's already a cycling program in the community that worked with kids with disabilities, and it was readily available to team up with the school district to help them get the equipment and the training they needed. The second is the community believes in complete inclusion. They believe all students should be educated together. So when it came about to the school, it was a natural fit that everyone would be part of that group. And the third is there were 2 students who were 9 years old who were actually part of the Safe Routes to School committee, and they shared their experience. Those 2 students just got completed the testifying for complete streets legislation that passed the year before this event occurred in 2009, and they were ready to act to use their advocacy role to share what students with disabilities had. One individual had a visual impairment and hearing impairment, and the other individual had a physical impairment. And they were very engaged to make sure every kid with a disability was part of this program. In fact, the young man right there in back of the tandem here is Connor, and he was part of that group that helped develop that Safe Routes to School. And where Safe Routes to School is missing a great opportunity is getting the voice of those advocates with people with disabilities. This young man now is 17 years old, and he has just received the Council for Exceptional Children's Advocate of the Year Award, which is called the Yes I Can Award, and was awarded in Tampa for the advocacy work. He has testified for Complete Streets, Right-Hand Turn Bills, Nathan's Law, and now he's been working with the 3 feet passing in Michigan, and is very frustrated the vulnerable user bill is kind of floundering in the House and Senate, but has been very active of making people independent and traveling. Community rides is the important part. If you see this line of students riding together, learning to ride together, the staff in the back, the second there, is actually taking the lead point for instructing, where the student is making all the decision points for the group and becoming a leader. We need role models with students of disabilities. Right now, that's one of the greatest things we can do with this program. If our young adults that go through this program can come back to the schools and teach others how to ride and learn how to become a leader and self-reliant, then we've taught the independence that everyone needs. The equipment is great and cool. Hand bikes we love, but it's the training and the ability to use it in the community that becomes the biggest challenge for us. This hand bike is aggressive, and all of our staff likes it. It's a wonderful chance for everyone to ride together. Talking about mentors and leadership, our Woodland Meadows is not, they were a one and done. They may have had 2 bike to school days. It didn't occur afterwards. However, the gentleman in the yellow shirt bent down there is Chris Masopoulos, who faces a moderate cognitive impairment. Chris volunteers to work with other kids with disabilities to help them ride and to become independent. Last year, Chris took a young man under his wing who faced autism and taught him how to ride to the library, and then taught him how to ride to school. And that young man now rides to the middle school every day because of Chris and him riding and working together. Chris is one of our volunteers and staff members in the organization of Peak. This picture is just wonderful, looks great. We can have the best infrastructure set up, but if we don't maintain it, we don't have accessibility. Snow is worse than the leaves, but not knowing what's underneath this could make it very challenging for somebody with a mobility device, and even more such as a wheelchair, but even more challenging for someone who uses a walker and has to try to get that through the leaves. Many times we miss the winter maintenance, we miss where we put our trash cans, we have cyclists putting their bikes in the area. We have a great chance here, Safe Routes to School. We have the chance to allow individuals with disabilities to get more physically fit. We allow individuals to be more socially integrated and to develop a mode of transportation. We have the chance to develop leaders that can show other kids with disabilities how to travel from place to place. Thank you so much, and I look forward to answering your questions.
We can't go in there unless we have.
Thanks so much, John. I'd like to introduce now Sara Mazze. She manages the Safe Routes to School program for the Eugene School District 4J, with the goal of making it safer and more appealing for students to use active transportation for their school commute. Her career focus has been encouraging environmentally positive behavioral change at the household, business, and community levels. She has expanded walk and roll events to include bus riders, and has expanded the district's pedestrian safety classes from reaching 30% of second graders to a model that will soon reach all elementary school students each year. She is proud to be coordinating with the City of Eugene to provide bike safety classes that are inclusive of all students. Take it away, Sara.
All right. Thank you so much for having me here to talk about our bike safety program. So a little bit of background on the Safe Routes to School program in the Eugene-Springfield area in general. We are in 3 different school districts. I'm in 4J, but work very closely with the coordinators in Springfield Public Schools and Bethel School District. Bethel is also in Eugene, mid-sized city in Oregon. And we have regional coordination through Lane Transit District Commute Options Program, which is point-to-point. And we work closely with various partners, including the City of Eugene for our bike safety program and our pedestrian safety program. We serve about 22,000 students in the 3 school districts with all 6 E's, which I won't go into again. And about half of our students live within a mile, but as is probably the same situation with many of you who are working on Safe Routes to School, those students in the walk zone don't all walk, unfortunately, but we're working on it. Our bike safety program up until just this last season has been coordinated through the City of Eugene's recreation program. And the 3 school districts have been contracting with the City of Eugene to run the bike safety program. They have a coordinator there, Zane Wheeler, who unfortunately couldn't be here today, but he hires and trains all of the bike safety instructors and maintains the gear in my district, not for all of the districts. Each school district has our own bike fleets. So we have collectively 6 trailers full of about 35 to 40 bikes each, the helmets, all the little mini stop signs, everything else we use. And we provide a 2-week course. It happens during PE class. And it's in the 5th grade classes in the smaller Bethel School District, which is in the elementary schools. There's too many elementary schools in 4J to do that, and in Springfield as well. So we do it in the 6th grade middle school PE classes. And so there might be 3 different classes happening during the course of a day. The students get about 9 hours of bike safety over those 2 weeks, and they some of them are actually just learning to ride for the first time, but the majority know how to ride, and so they're learning bike handling skills, and they're learning the rules of the road, and they're getting a lot of practice. They are on their bikes pretty much every day, and they, except for the first day really, they practice at intersections, and by the end of the course, the last 2 days typically, they're out in the community doing rides of several miles, as you can see here. I'm going to pass it over to Cassie here, who is from the City of Eugene's Hilliard Community Center. Oh, actually, one more thing. I want to just go back and say the City of Eugene has been running this for the 3 school districts until, like I said, just a few months ago. We're trying to expand our program so that we can reach every school, every middle school, in those having in middle school and every elementary in Bethel. Part of the reason we can't expand is funding, and also it's the capacity of the City of Eugene. So we're actually moving the Springfield programs out to their recreation district, Willamette, and so that just happened this last spring, and we expect will continue into the future, giving a little more capacity for us in Eugene. So,
great. Hi, my name's Carly Schmidt. I'm with the City of Eugene Adaptive Recreation Program. We have an adaptive recreation program that provides different types of recreation opportunities for people with a variety of different abilities and disabilities. So we do physical, social, skills, educational programs for children and adults. One of the programs that we offer is our adaptive cycling program. We have a variety of adaptive bikes at our community center where people can come in, they get an assessment and a fitting done to see what bike is going to work best for them. So this is available to any community member who is unable to ride a traditional standard 2-wheel upright bike. So we see a lot of kids coming through who have, just balance and coordination issues. We see adults who have had knee replacements. We see elderly people who don't have the balance to ride a two-wheel bike anymore. So we get a lot of use in our bikes throughout different community members. And we also are supporting the Safe Routes to School program through providing our bikes for kids in the schools who are also unable to ride a standard two-wheel bike. So this could be because they have a temporary disability, they have a broken leg, or it could be, a child with autism who needs a little extra support on a bike.
Okay. And Carly will be available to answer questions as well, because she's got the experience and knowledge about those bikes. So as Chris was saying earlier, the partnerships are really key. So the way that our partnership works with the Hilliard Community Center is that the original Safe Routes to School grant that created a program in the 4J School District, which was the first of the 3 districts here to have a Safe Routes program, specified the purchase of one adaptive bike. And they're not cheap. They're several, $1,000 to $5,000 or $6,000. At this point, the 4J program has purchased 3 adaptive bikes: the Buddy Bike Tandem, the Terra Trike Tadpole, and the Cat Trike Tadpole. And I'll show some pictures of these. We house these bikes at the Hilliard Community Center, and they're able to use them for their programming. And in return, we're able to use all of the different options that they have. So we have access to 15 different styles of adaptive bikes. There haven't been a lot of scheduling conflicts because our main programming for bike safety is happening in the fall and spring, and the Hilliard's busiest season is the summer. Another way that we've partnered essentially is that their funding, the Hilliard Center's funding to purchase bikes, comes from their general budget, sometimes through grants and donations, which in some cases it's been easier for those grants or donations to come to the Safe Routes to School program. We are really benefiting from the knowledge and the ability to store these bikes, and just the number of bikes and the type of bikes that they have. And the way that this partnership is really benefiting both organizations is it's helping us both serve our missions and meet our goals. So in just about all of each session that we teach, we're using some kind of adaptive bike. And the first step is really just making the teachers aware of what's available. So we partner with the PE teachers. We need their permission to essentially take over their class for 2 weeks, providing our bike safety class. And before each class, we ask the teacher if there's any accommodation that they need for disabilities, and tell them the ways that we can do that. And we make efforts to include every student based on the equipment that we have available. So here are some examples of the bikes that we're using in our classes or that are available to students. And some of the types of abilities that we've included are non-riders for whatever reason. We will try generally to teach students how to ride a two-wheeler, but if they can't figure it out by the time that we leave campus for the community ride or for a practice at an intersection, for example, they can still typically participate on a trike, on a tadpole, on a tag-along or tow-behind, which I don't have an example here, but you see that a lot with, I've got one for my 7-year-old where she can ride attached to my bike, pedaling on her own wheel, or a cargo bike if a student is, they can at least get the feel of the balance of a bike just by sitting on the back of a cargo bike and see the rules of the road in action. Students that aren't able to use an arm because it's broken or some other reason can still participate on a trike or a tadpole. If a student has no legs or a broken leg or torn tendons, they can still participate with a hand cycle. If someone has poor balance because of a head trauma or another reason, they can use a tandem bike or a trike. And I have one example, well, I have 2 examples of tandems here essentially. I have the tandem in the middle and top middle there, but there are also side-by-side tandems, which we don't tend to use that as much, even though it is an option. They're a little, it's, I think, harder for them to keep up on the community rides with those. The buddy bike there lets the student have the feeling of the balance, and it's nice they're in the front of the bike and can see everything. If there's a student that's scared to ride a bike but is comfortable on a scooter, they can participate on a street legal scooter that has larger wheels and has brakes. And in our experience, we haven't really found that there's a lot of stigma for a student on one of the adaptive bikes. A lot of the kids think these bikes are really cool and they want to try them out as well. The students that don't need them. If you were only to be able to buy one adaptive bike for a program, Zane said that the bike of choice for him would be the Cat Trek Tadpole. And what the pros of this bike are that it can be used for a lot of the different disabilities that we see, non-riders, balance issues. It's fast enough to keep up with the group that are on the traditional two-wheel bikes. It's stable. It doesn't tip over as easily as a lot of the trikes do that have the two wheels in the back and the one wheel in the front. Some of them tip around the corners. And the kids think it's really cool. They want to try this one out. And a con of this bike is that it's really low to the ground, so it's not very visible. You need to use a flag with it, and it's not particularly adjustable. So to wrap up here, maintenance and storage, of course, is an issue, and a lot of the adaptive bikes use bike parts that are on the traditional two-wheel bikes, but they're using it in new designs. So most mechanics should be able to figure out repairs and spare parts. If we have problems with the bikes while they're in our care for our bike safety classes, we fix the bikes before we return them to the Hilliard Center. The Hilliard Center has an arrangement with an entity up in Portland that actually comes down and for a reasonable cost provides maintenance for the whole fleet of adaptive bikes, and they specialize in adaptive bikes. But we have had maintenance from local mechanics as well. As with any Safe Routes to School program, storage is an issue. When the bikes are at our schools, we can fit one of these adaptive bikes typically into our bike trailer with the rest of the fleet. And the trailers just get moved from school to school wherever there's a bike safety class, and they're locked up at night with all the bikes inside. So we can fit one, but the day-to-day storage is at Hilliard Community Center. In this room here, you can see the space is being maximized, and that's another great part of the partnership. That is really helpful to us to not have to store all those bikes. And with that, I'll just say thank you again for having us, and Carly and I are happy to answer questions.
Thank you so much, Sarah. That was really a big thank you to all of our speakers. This has been really wonderful. Want to use this time now to answer questions. We've had quite a few questions that have come through. So to get started, just kind of following up on partnerships, can any of the panelists elaborate on partners for ideas for who to reach out to locally to kind of get started, whether this is for bicycles or training or just resources and support in general? Who wants to take that one?
I can start with it. This is Chris. I think probably my fellow panelists can probably speak to the equipment and the bicycles a little bit more than I could. But I think just in terms of training and looking at basics of how to work with students with disabilities, again, seek out, professionals that might just naturally be in the school, but other organizations that are in every state, like Centers for Independent Living, that are run by people with disabilities. They have experience with providing training on inclusion to a variety of organizations. There's disability organizations that are pretty prolific, pretty widespread throughout the country, like Easter Seals, UCP. All of these organizations have some expertise in how to work with people with disabilities. Autism Speaks is a popular one that many people probably know. all of these organizations have experience with working with people with a variety of disabilities, or in some cases specific disability, and worth reaching out to. And I hope that's at least a little bit helpful.
Great. Thank you so much. I have a question here for Sara. Question about, did the Eugene Springfield Safe Routes School have to go through the Buy America process to purchase the adaptive bikes, or are they not steel? Question mark.
That the purchase happened before my time, but we are actually looking at buying some bike racks, for example, and we are having to go through that process. I think there might be an exclusion for lesser amounts, for purchases, smaller purchases, so it's possible that an adaptive bike could fall under that threshold. But I guess that's a long answer for, I should probably find out from Zane Wheeler, who was around when those purchases happened, and I don't know if there's a way for me to get back to this person about it. I can share that information with the National Partnership.
Perfect. Yeah, we can follow. Okay. We can follow up with that.
Okay, sound good. Sound good.
Okay, great. Okay, I have a question here for John. Who provided the bikes / gave funding for equipment for Bike Day for everyone?
That was actually, well, everyone who could bring their own bikes brought their own bikes. The rest of the bikes came in our 2 or 3 trucks through the Peak organization. We have an 8,000 square foot building loaded with adaptive bikes, standard bikes, and we take our fleet of bikes out to each site when we're running the programs during the summer. So basically our trucks are loaded up with adaptive bikes and we brought them all.
Great. Thanks, John. Another question for you, Sara, about who's doing the teaching in schools. Is it the PE teachers or the rec department staff?
The rec department hires typically 2 instructors. Well, they hire a group of instructors. We typically have 2 in each PE class. The PE teacher is present, and a lot of what they're doing is just, classroom management and behavior management. On the community rides, we get volunteers to help as well. So there are, 4 to 6 or 7 people on those rides. And the PE teacher typically stays in the back and is the sweep, while there's an instructor in the front, and then the rest of the group is at intersections or other spots along the route and kind of leapfrogging with the group to keep the students safe.
Thank you. I have a question here for anyone that wants to take it about your experience trying to get sidewalks in where there aren't any near a school versus getting existing sidewalks made accessible.
This is John. I also run a program called our ATP, our Active Transportation Program. We work with young adults with disabilities, and every year they have to pick up a community access or a community project where they advocate for, and they have to go through all the steps. And that means going through the steps of contacting the city, finding out who owns the property, who gets billed for it, and go through that process. So we've been very successful in infrastructure changes, but it takes so long. So usually if we have a high school student coming as a 9th grader, they'll see the change by the time they graduate. But a lot of times if they pick it up in their senior year, they'll not get to see the infrastructure change.
Yeah, I do work quite a bit. I do work quite a bit with the city and the county, because we've got county and city streets in my district, on improving the infrastructure around schools. And yes, agreed. It takes a long time, and it's not always simple because neighbors don't always want a sidewalk in front of their house. And my understanding is that it's easier to improve a sidewalk than to add one, but we have places where there are none, so I continue to work on that.
Okay, great. I think we have time for one more question for any any panelists here, have you seen any local transit agencies or planning organizations participating in any of these inclusive programs?
This is John. We actually work, the majority of our programming is with transit organizations and working with young adults. The Smart Bus System, the RTA in the Metro Detroit area are funding us to go into schools and teach young adults with disabilities how to travel from location to location. They also become advocates where they sit on the RTA committee, and they are helping make decisions about how to make the transit system more accessible.
Wonderful. A big thank you to everyone. Just a reminder that this webinar will be posted within 48 hours, and please take our survey. And our next webinar will be coming up on June 27th. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you.